Hey everybody, Brian Beeler here alongside Kevin O'Brien in the Storage Review Lab, and today we're working on a very special project. We've started to talk about it already, and Kevin, you've been working on this. We've got this cluster of Dell AX nodes in the lab.
Yeah, it's been a pretty fun project. We're using it to run some SQL Server workloads and some of our four corner workloads. And it's a pretty fast box. They're loaded with 10 NVMe drives each and connected over a pretty fast backend network that's switchless.
So what Dell did was a couple weeks ago, they updated their Azure Stack HCI offerings. So they've got these new nodes that are branded AX nodes. So that's what we're looking at, are a couple of the 640s.
Yeah.
Runs on PowerEdge hardware, so familiar things that we all know and love. But there's a lot more to it than that. It's not just about providing HCI solutions for ROBO or edge use cases. And to talk a little bit more about that, we're going to bring in our good friend Michael Lamia from Dell. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, happy to be here. Thanks for
We're glad
inviting
you're
me.
here. We know you're the expert on the product and you know the robo use case as well. Before we dive all the way into that and then look at the solution and then show people how upgrades work and all the other good stuff you've got going on, talk a little bit about how Dell got here and what's important about this AX launch.
Yeah, thanks. So we've been at this for a long time. It's been quite a great evolutionary journey for us. What we've done with this new launch in July was we've really built a modern platform that really has simplicity woven into it from start to finish. Easy to design, size, order, deploy, manage, maintain, and support. It's a fully productized, validated, hyper-converged solution running Windows Server 2019 with software-defined compute with Hyper-V and software-defined storage with Storage Spaces Direct and a virtual networking. Each chassis component, even down to the BIOS, firmware, and driver revisions, are all tested and certified by our engineering organization to optimize the virtualization experience. So you mentioned the AX nodes. What we've created is an intelligently curated portfolio of three models of AX nodes with configurations to really meet or exceed the requirements of nearly any workload or use case, from the smallest small office to the most demanding database workloads. You can choose from, on the storage side, high capacity spinning drives, solid state drives, as in the case of the rig that we sent you, NVMe, Intel Optane persistent memory. You can choose from a variety of processors, memory capacities, and of course 25 gig networking for RDMA. I want to say when we start working with prospective customers, we start talking with them. I mean, the first thing that we really want to understand is how their current environment is running. And we get a sense of that through a tool that we use called Live Optics. This is going to help us collect real-time data, what they're using today in terms of capacity and performance in their running environment. Then we're going to take that information, we're going to feed it into a very sophisticated and powerful Azure Stack HCI online sizing tool that's available with working with your Dell Technologies account team. And that's going to allow us to play with a variety of configurations and make sure that what we end up ordering is going to meet today's needs and allow for future growth. Now, if you want 100% turnkey, we definitely recommend Dell EMC Pro Deploy services.
Well, that's kind of what
We're
we
going
ended
to,
up with in a roundabout sort of way, right? Because we ended
yeah,
up with
absolutely.
that keel case that's not typical, but is sort of what you would deliver in that pro deploy model.
Yeah, you got the you got the platinum, so you got the Cadillac service.
Good, that's what we like.
From us, and that's what any customer will get from Pro Deploy Services is subject matter experts that'll come in and guarantee that it's going to get set up correctly, and really accelerate organizations' time to value. Make sure that this new platform is providing value immediately, and of course, help is available right around the corner. From top to bottom, full stack from our Dell EMC Pro support organization. They're not just going to help you out with the hardware. They are going to also support the operating system. Anything goes wrong with Hyper-V or storage spaces direct. They're here to help from head to toe.
Actually, we've been there before. When you were setting up all those switches that from Dell a while back, you spent days with the pro support team.
Yeah, they were very knowledgeable and helped out a bunch. Since we're experts in most areas, but when it comes down to very specific use cases, there are some things
especially around networking, since we don't have a networking expert.
Yeah.
So that's our use case, but that's certainly something that is useful in this case as well for your customers, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. We get raving reviews about our pro support. Now, arguably, I haven't even mentioned, all these great benefits. I haven't even mentioned, I think arguably the best part of the story here is in the area of monitoring, management, and maintenance. We have created an open manage integration extension into Microsoft Windows Admin Center that provides deep hardware monitoring and inventorying. But better than that is cluster aware updating. So we have streamlined the process to update the cluster, to orchestrate the updates of BIOS firmware and drivers using the cluster aware updating feature of Windows Server 2019. And we're able to perform those updates with zero impact to the workloads running in the VMs. You guys saw that in action.
Well, we did, and we're going to get to that. We're going to walk through some of those features. But one of the things that we also want to look at is the hardware. So you mentioned NVMe drives. Michael, you talked about hard drives and some of the other different configurations that you can make for these clusters depending on the needs. We got the good one though with the NVMe drives, which is always great. And these are in those 640 nodes. Let's actually take a look at our hardware cluster here. Look at that guy.
Beautiful. What a beautiful thing.
Now this was destined for a trade show, but we were able to waylay this thing from you. And as we look at the hardware here, Michael, work top to bottom or bottom up, whichever way you like. What are we looking at here?
Well, first, as you said earlier, let's just be clear. Your cluster won't come in the Keel case, right? And so the KVM and the jump box that we put at the top of the rack and not part of the equation. You move down a little bit further, we've got our Dell EMC networking S5012 switches. So these are 25 gig switches. And let's be clear. So these switches, because later we're going to talk about this switchless storage networking topology. But of course, you still need switches for management and VM traffic to the outside world. And so that's what these guys are for. And then we get down to the AX640s themselves. And we outfitted these guys with dual 20-core Intel Xeon Gold 6230 processors. Those are running at 2.1 gigahertz. 384 gig of RAM in each. As Kevin said, the 10 NVMe drives. And then 25 gig network adapters, the QLogic network adapters. And then, so back to that switchless storage idea, what we've done, too bad we can't see the rear of the Keel case. So we've got a direct connection between the QLogic network adapters on both nodes for the storage traffic. It's called a dual link full mesh switchless storage networking topology. It's a mouthful, but what it does is the great thing is that what this is going to do is save customers from potentially an investment in switches to accommodate these higher storage networking speeds for RDMA and such.
Well, it's interesting too, because one of the things that I enjoy about using those 640s is the density. And if you're going to look at a ROBO use case, having those small packages, because they may not have full racks of gear in a small office environment.
Oh yeah, especially when you look at the cost of those higher speed ports. If your solution requires that particular add-on, it's a substantial increase in price that might be close to what the solution costs itself, depending on what you're looking at or the minimum sizing for some switches. So being able to do direct connect, you're able to offer a much lower entry price point.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I like too about the flash configuration, and we'll be talking about this some more when we release our performance numbers that Kevin will tease a little bit today. But one of the great things about having that much performance in each of those nodes is that if you lose a node, so if we're going to worry about resiliency in a small business sort of scenario, you've got to think about all those workloads that were on both nodes now being on one node, and that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, so there's always that balance of how things are handled performance-wise, and everyone's biggest worry, especially when you look at multi-controller solutions, is what happens if one drops out.
Yeah, so Michael, is that something you guys are seeing in the field as you go to the ROBO with this type of solution, worries about or concerns about resiliency of the solution?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, performance and resiliency, and the idea with this kind of a configuration here, which is, a pretty hefty. The performance numbers. I'm privy to the teaser numbers, and I mean they're pretty outstanding. And we talk about making storage performance irrelevant, sort of kind of saying that tongue in cheek. And what we mean by that is just alleviating the IT professional who's responsible for the ROBO environment, relieving them of the stress around performance and availability. And in fact, just removing any concerns about that from the equation altogether. Even when it comes to management and monitoring, the idea of in the failure scenarios, like Kevin was talking about, to be able to guarantee outstanding performance, a consistent end user response time, even while the cluster is degraded. I mean, that's pretty great stuff. Just takes worry out of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kevin, as we're thinking about this, as you were testing it, you ran some SQL Server workloads against it.
Yeah, not just some. I mean, we were running a fairly large footprint. We started off with 4 VMs, which we had 2 on each node, and then we scaled up to 8 VMs. And these are 1,500 scale SQL Server instances with a TPCC workload. We're using Benchmark Factory to apply 15,000 virtual users per VM session, and the numbers are really good. We're looking at average latency of 2.25 milliseconds on 4 VMs total. It went up to 5 milliseconds at 8. But the nice thing is when you look at the failure modes, you remove a drive from one node, that figure just increased to 6.5 milliseconds. So not much of a blip. And then
and I know you were looking at some of those real-time monitors when you're benchmarking, and then pull the drive and watch and see what happens, and you catch a little action.
Yeah, there's like a split second, like a little momentary latency spike, and then the average kind of just slowly goes back down to where it was originally. But you look at you remove an entire node from that situation, and the latency of that only goes up to 5.9 milliseconds. You actually, it's slightly better than a failed drive because you have less back-end networking traffic. It just does really well.
Right, and so what we find is that when you put all those workloads on one node, that it does really well because it has to work a little less hard, but it still does really well. And I think, Michael, this comes back to the point about resiliency, whether it's a drive or a node out in the wild, that there has to be that feeling that performance is still going to be there and that their workloads aren't going to suffer. The work that Kevin's talking about seems pretty consistent with that messaging.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, if you think about, just challenges as a whole surrounding ROBO environments, specifically about this performance and availability, I tend, in the ROBO environments that I've seen and heard from my customers, you really have to be ready for anything. There's a highly diversified portfolio of applications that may be coming your way as a supporter of environments like this. Now, you've always got your usual suspects like Active Directory, file and print, and such. But especially in situations where the enterprise is using their remote sites as business continuity target destinations for the main corporate data center. So think about that, mission critical and applications that require top-notch performance and availability running in the ROBO for an indeterminate period of time. I mean, you got to make sure that your end user response time is consistent to meet your SLAs.
Yeah, absolutely. And with everything that you've got here, and especially the nodes we have, that's not been a problem. In fact, we've seen tremendous performance in these degraded positions. Now, you do offer, we just had the 10 NVMe drives, but you have configurations, as you noted before, with persistent memory. You've got the AX740 if you need a larger unit, but you also have an AMD-based unit. Talk to us about that a little bit and what you're doing there to help differentiate those models.
Yeah, that's our AX6515 platform. So we're running that's just a single socket, 64 core Gen 2 AMD EPYC processor, which is a very powerful for one socket. And I mean, we refer to it as our value optimized platform. So, the other thing with AMD that we hear from some customers is they're looking to diversify their processor layout in their enterprise for security reasons. So, we know that there's been some pretty significant vulnerabilities that have occurred in the last couple of years. And so it just makes sense to some customers to diversify the models of manufacturers of processors that they have out there. So that's another big reason why folks look at the 6515 along with an extremely attractive price point. And the 6515, that only comes with solid state drives.
Right.
So
and you're
no
using
NVMe
SATA
spinning.
drives there too to help control the cost profile.
Yeah, exactly.
And still seeing good performance. And I know we're talking so much about performance, but one of the better things about this latest release from Dell EMC is the integration with WAC, and specifically from my view, the Lifecycle Control Manager, because some of those things have been around in other Dell products in the past, like Rail, right? But now to be able to bring those throughout the HCI portfolio and hit the Azure Stack HCI offering specifically is pretty strong.
Yeah, it's nice to have that level of integration that not every vendor gives you.
Right. So we've got a walkthrough of what we did there. We actually went through and updated our cluster and watched it go through the process. Kevin was running some workload against it during that process. And we've got a great look into how that works. So now we're going to take a look at the UI on our 2-node cluster. Kevin, what do we have going on here?
So this is Windows Admin Center, and the main view that you get on any of these platforms is the dashboard, which gives you like memory usage, CPU usage, storage usage, and then also some of the instantaneous performance on a real-time basis, or hourly, daily, etc. One thing that's kind of unique on the Dell platform is the OpenManage integration.
Right.
And this is where it's pretty cool because you get access into the underlying system components which you generally don't have the visibility into other platforms. So this is an area where we see everything is green, and we're about to go into the update process, but here's where you get to make sure that all of your components are green and everything is ready to move into that process.
Michael, what else is green is that badge up at the top. I know you guys take a lot of pride in that.
Yeah, for sure, Brian. Yeah, so that Azure Stack HCI certified badge, we get that by reading the identity model on the I'm sorry, the identity module on the AX nodes. I mean, so this identifies and guarantees that we're dealing with genuine AX nodes from Dell EMC. And then later, when if we go to select an online catalog to do our updates, we know that we'll be dealing with a specially curated solution catalog that will provide us BIOS, firmware, and drivers tested and guaranteed for Azure Stack HCI.
Okay, in this case, Kevin, we're using the offline because this this cluster's not touching the web, right?
Correct. So this gives you a chance where if either differing versions or you might not expect an outside web access for your cluster, you can manage everything offline and it'll just roll through the process.
And so you've picked up this file from Dell support. Mike, so if we're doing online or offline, it doesn't really matter. It's the same process underneath. What's going on in this build?
Yep. So for the offline, what we get our solution catalog from Dell Repository Manager, and that's going to be the same solution catalog with the tested and guaranteed BIOS, firmware, and drivers that we would access if we were using the online method. And so all of the Dell update packages have been downloaded along with the utilities that we need to perform this update to a share that is accessible from the AX nodes. And so that's it's going out and grabbing those files right now and generating a compliance report to determine what actually needs to be updated. While this is going too, I should just mention that all of this communication going on with the AX nodes that you've seen so far is all in-band and completely agent-free. So the Windows Admin Center is communicating with the servers via WMI over WinRM and remote PowerShell. And our extension, the Open Manage integration, is communicating with the iDRACs via OS to iDRAC pass-through and Redfish technology.
Yeah, it's pretty slick actually, because when you think about systems management, it's typically a software patches and hardware things are viewed as two really distinct operations. I think you've really got to hammer the point home that with this solution with the AX nodes that you're getting everything in this bundle, both through what you would normally do in iDRAC and through the system itself.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and so when we were doing this, Kevin, you were running workloads at the same time. Talk a little bit about how the workloads were managed through here.
So this it takes the same approach you'd find for taking it offline. So the compliant workloads that can move on to the other node, those are migrated over in a live migration, and that particular node is the one that's going to be updated is taken offline. Checks are put into place to make sure that everything is smooth. It does its updating. It comes back online. Cluster brings it back into the cluster, depending on how many nodes are in there. And then your workloads are migrated back onto it. And then the second node or other nodes in that cluster are go and repeat that process.
Yeah, and so in our process, you quickly went through that screen, but you took all those updates, and now it's going to take one node down, roll everything, like you said, over to the second one, then reverse, and then we're back up and running. For our 2-node cluster, how long did this take the last time you went through it?
I think it was about 45 minutes.
Okay, 45 minutes, non-disruptive, pretty strong then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a critical part of this cluster because it's so easy to manage, And Michael, I know we've talked about it as part of this, but at the ROBO or at the edge, you may not have technical practitioners on site or readily available. This type of operational benefit is pretty important then at the edge.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just going to make it as simple as possible. I mean, as you can see, what did it take us to get to this point where we're actually applying the updates like,
Yeah.
3-4 clicks
Mm-hmm.
was about it. And there was no real potential here for human error. There wasn't, Kevin didn't need to type in a whole lot of information. There wasn't any extensive wizards that he had to walk through where he would need to choose options to go down one path or another. Just very simple. Identify a CIFS share where our Dell update packages and the necessary utilities are located. Put in the UNC path to that share, put in the credentials to that share. Prior to that, we downloaded our specially curated solution catalog from Dell Repository Manager, and that's it. A couple clicks, and then the Open Manage extension takes it from there. Like you said, the download of the packages is happening automatically. You can see right here running pre-update script. So this is going through an extensive health check of the cluster, making sure everything is working flawlessly. If there's any errors detected somewhere in the cluster, this update is just going to stop, until the cluster is in great health.
Okay, yeah, and from a performance perspective too, it's important that these nodes are pretty well equipped with NVMe storage, because when you go through this process, you're going to effectively lose half of your compute power, right? So.
Yeah.
So making sure that these things are one size properly, but now the way these two are set up on these AX640s, we're not even really worried about performance, because as we've seen, it just absorbs your SQL workloads and keeps cranking.
Yeah, the performance profile is really strong with either a failed drive or a failed node. You just had to make sure you did considerations around RAM footprint to make sure all of your workloads can be moved onto the other node if needed.
Right.
Yeah, another thing is we're only ever going to need to reboot each node in the cluster only up to one time. So, despite the fact, I have done a lot of update testing in the past, and if you're going back several months, you might have a handful of firmware, your BIOS, and your operating system drivers. And sometimes those drivers require that you reboot after each dupe installation. So we've managed to orchestrate the applying of all of these updates all together, one reboot, before we take that node out of maintenance mode and move on to the next node. And in my testing, about 40-45 minutes is about the maximum time that it's going to take to fully patch any node.
And we will spare our video watchers the entire 45 minutes of this process. Trust us, it works. When you think about what these tools enable, not just from a consistency standpoint and keeping your infrastructure modern standpoint, a lot of businesses historically won't upgrade because it's a pain. It's difficult. So what do you have to do to help get the word out there more? I mean, obviously we're making this video walkthrough right now, and that's critical to help push the messaging about this WAC integration and how important these tools are. But do you think as that gets more into market and your customers get more educated about what you're doing there, will they update more often? Will they be more secure as a result?
Well, I certainly hope so, because by not updating, what are you all missing? You're missing out on the latest and greatest bug fixes. There's always performance and availability enhancements going on with every update. As you mentioned, security. always critical to keep BIOS firmware and drivers along with your operating system all update from a security perspective. So I really hope it does encourage customers. I mean, we've tried to make this as absolutely simple as possible. And again, going back to some of the other things we have, I mean, this will be great if you want to see what it's like to do the online catalog. Just a little bit different using Dell Repository Manager. What that looks like to download the necessary packages for the offline method here. You can check out a video a very extended, like a 10-minute video that I created out on InfoHub. I've also got another video that goes into all the monitoring, so the hardware monitoring that we do, the inventorying. There's cool things that you can do for a ROBO environment. Just one you think it's small, but it's pretty powerful. Is the ability to blink or unblink a beacon light on drives from within the Open Manage integration. So if you're a subject matter expert, IT pro, remote, and you need, say, someone from the business to help swap a drive or identify a drive for you or something like that, you can turn that beacon on. Just little things like that really help.
Yeah, those little operational things are nice, aren't they? To make sure that, especially if you're managing several of these locations, that it's easy to facilitate some of those quick fixes to get done. So we've talked a lot about the performance, the resiliency, the WAC integration, the lifecycle updates, and all that great stuff. Can you tease anything about what the Dell vision is for Azure Stack HCI going forward, or anything else up your sleeve there?
Well, I mean, I'm sure customers have heard from Inspire. Microsoft has some big plans for a purpose-driven, a purpose-built Azure Stack HCI operating system that is a branch off of the mainline Windows Server development track. And that's just going to allow a plethora of new things. I'm not sure how much I can all share what's out there in the public world, but there's going to be deep integration with Azure. The ability to manage large numbers of geographically distributed clusters in a very easy way. And I guess the big teaser from us is, if you think the cluster-aware updating is nice now, wait until you see integrated deployment and full stack updating that takes all BIOS firmware and drivers and couples that with the OS updates to make administrators' lives really easy.
Well, that sounds pretty cool, and we know the stuff coming from Microsoft is pretty sweet. And you touched on Azure, and in this conversation we didn't even bring it up, but there's a lot of great tools there now, like Azure Site Recovery is great for the ROBO use case. There's a lot of other stuff there. So looking forward to watch that get tightened up a little more, get bundled together. I mean, that's pretty, it's exciting looking forward. Well, Michael, this has been a great conversation. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground. I'm so glad you were able to join us today, and that we could go over the hardware, go over the software, go through the models. I mean, there's a lot going on there, and we'll put all those links that you referenced. We'll embed those in the YouTube comment or the conversation there, so you can share that out.
It's been a real pleasure joining you guys today and working with you on this effort. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, we're glad to have you, and for our audience out there, thanks for tuning in.